the strategies of the 60s seem to get people's attention. So I think that you will see more people in that age group responding. I think you'll see a coalition between the local kind of organizations, the NAACPs, Urban Leagues, et cetera, working together, and then maybe linking arms with the more non-traditional leaders of our community, the Bundys, the Trader Truths, the local celebrities in your population.
I am Lawrence Payne, a proud graduate of the University of St. Thomas, class of 1972. Please join us each week for a wonderful program here at Mac Studios from our campus entitled For Such a Time as This. Each week we examine with our guests the social, economic, spiritual, and emotional issues that we face as human beings. Our discussions are rooted in unconditional love. We look at the 2 feet of Catholic social teaching, charity, and justice. Please join us here from Mac Studio for such a time as this. Welcome to this segment of For Such a Time as This, coming to you from the campus of the University of St. Thomas. It is a great pleasure every week to bring you this show. We feature a lot of community leaders and a lot of people who've done a lot for our city and for our church. I am so happy and proud to have a good friend of mine of long time standing to join me today, and that's no other than Judson Robinson III, the president and CEO of the Houston Area Urban League. Judson, welcome.
Larry, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm honored to be on your show, my friend.
Well, thank you. Before we get into talking about any issues, which you and I can do for all day, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and your history and background, because the Robinsons have a great history and legacy in this city and also within the Catholic Church.
Well, first of all, just thank you for that opening remark. You would think I'm 60 plus years old now, and that question still comes up a lot. My mom and dad have been deceased for a while. My dad more than 30 plus years. My mom less than 10. But it's interesting to be a son, the only child son. I have a sister, but to be the one that kind of chose to continue on in the family footsteps of public service, and really, be in a position whereby it was important to kind of look at the pros and cons from my own, personal life and what I may have wanted or not wanted to do. My sister has a mental challenge, so that's why I say to a degree I'm an only child when it comes to making decisions such as this. And I see her every week. We get together and make sure that we break bread, and she is just part of what my mom and dad strive to make sure there was a degree of normalcy in her life, and I try to continue carrying that torch with great honor. So, I recall when my grandfather on my dad's side was sick, and we would spend our weekends when the nurse was off taking care of Big Judd. And as a young man in my probably late 20s, early 30s, that was my weekend. That's what we did from, sun up to sundown until we were relieved. And then when my mom was sick, of course, I took care of her. When my dad was sick, my mother and my father, my mother and myself took care of them. So family service to the individual has always been very important and a part of what I've known. And then family commitment to your community. My grandfather, Judge Sr., lived a very interesting life, becoming a pioneer in so many of the organizations that we take for granted today, be it the Chamber or the Urban League or YMCA, all of those pioneer organizations, Houston Business Professional Men's Club. And when my dad became of age, he too kind of joined these organizations. He picked up where my grandfather left off on the business side and moved forward with real estate and insurance and things of that nature. My grandfather thought he was maybe good enough to maybe be in public service, encouraged him to do that. And because we had a business relationship with the community, be they Black primarily and also white, and that being the end of the 1960s, early 70s, we thought it was a good time in our family's history to try to do something that no other Black family had done since Reconstruction, and that was to become a city councilman, elected official. And so I've had a chance to kind of witness all these things and have discussions with these people. And so to me, my life has been fairly unremarkable and fairly unnormal because it has been what I've seen. It was my normal. And I tell people all the time, I'm a pretty ordinary person who just kind of was raised in an inordinary family for the times and live life perhaps in an inordinary kind of way, right? A young person spending all their weekends, feeding your grandfather and helping him go to the restroom. And, once you finally get of age and get your mortgage and your house and your cars and your wife, and the next thing you know, as a young person, your father has passed on and everyone is saying, well, surely you're going to run for city council. And I, of course, saying, well, surely, of course I am, right? So again, as I look back on it now, Larry, being in my early 60s, I'm getting the chance to kind of reflect and make some sense of it all. So thanks again for just having me on board to share a little bit about maybe something that's of interest to your listeners today. But as president of the Urban League, it's a great honor because we get a chance to help people every day. Just yesterday, we were called on by Councilmember Carolyn Evans Shabazz to see if we could be helpful to a family, several families, 6 of them, that were about to be evicted due to the storm and haven't been able to work and all that stuff, lost their jobs, etc. And the Urban League was able to respond. That's a great victory for the Urban League. I'm just lucky to be at the helm where we can try to help make some things happen and maybe someone else's dreams can come true, like my dad or my granddad or my mother, or maybe even mine, could be put into that same category. So anyway, good to be here.
It's such a great history. I mean, from Judge Senior to Big Jud to Juddy, by the way. It really, and now there's another Justin Robinson. Isn't that the 4th?
Yep. That's my son.
All right.
Yep. So
listen, I want to get into the issues because times go by so quickly. And really, I don't know really where to start. Well, yes, I do. That's not true. But let me just start with the one that I think the Urban League can help and do something about. And then I'll jump into the other 3 craziness of the state that's going on. The bill legislation that was passed, I guess, the other evening on outlawing all the homeless encampments. All the homeless encampments in the states, all the one you see around Houston under the freeways, et cetera, they're all going to have to go. And the problem with that is, first, it's inhumane. There's no humanity in that. There's no compassion in that. But it doesn't talk about any plan of what you're going to do for them and with them and where you're going to house them. So just to say that their living arrangements, which is actually with the tents that everybody's been donating, is best they've had in a while, to do away with that with no idea of how you're going to help replace any of that living, where are these people to go? What are we to do? I mean, that's to me is a community question that we as a community have to bear responsibility. It's not just a city question, it's a community question. How are we going to let these people just be totally removed and what's going to happen to them?
I had the opportunity this past week to ride up to Austin and advocate for one of the bills that was being proposed, and of course to complain about a bill that had already passed. But as you mentioned in reference to voting and access to to the poll. But while I was there, I was taken because I wasn't there for that purpose. And I was surprised. I happened to rent a space downtown. And I was shocked because I've heard so much about our homeless issues in Houston in comparison to so many other major cities. And Austin being one of those cities where it is in a state of disbelief. The numbers of people that are living in these tents that you talked about, the number of locations that they are placed all over the city and under the freeways and along the various walkways and byways. It was shocking and disheartening. And like you, back when I was on city council many years ago, when we agreed to redevelop Midtown, we knew that at the time there was a lot of abandoned housing and buildings, and that we had a lot of people living in them. We talked about everything, I think, except what to do about the existing residents. And you would think after all of those years, I was back in the 90s when I was on council, you would think, that we've learned that lesson that you can't talk about plan A without talking about plan B.
Right.
You got to have one working with the other. And I guess sometimes government pivots to the voters and to the other agencies that are loosely tasked with identifying how to address the problem. So that it reaches another degree of crescendo, but it's off their desk. That's the thing. The governor's made a move that has at least alleviated him of the responsibility of making a decision one way or the other. Because those in power obviously are probably suggesting that, we need to move the homeless off the streets. And it's your job as governor, it's the police departments, or it's the social service agencies, it's their job to figure out where they go. Many years ago, we took away a lot of the mental health beds in Harris County and throughout the state. And we've seen how the trickle has turned into a tidal wave of people that, without some degree of safety net, we run into this problem. So to me, it's kind of become just a way of governing that is inhumane, that is very un-Catholic.
Yeah.
It's just not the way to do things. And I don't know. I guess society
goes against everything. It goes against Catholic social teaching. It goes against solidarity. It goes against just basic common humanity. And so the question I have to ask next is one that I think is just, to me, not incredible because I'm like you, I've been around long enough, it doesn't surprise me. But the trifecta that's going on in Austin now with first of all, the gun legislation that everybody can carry. And second one, as you mentioned, the voter suppression bills, which is just horrendous. And now this new one that you can't teach racism and American slavery in schools in Texas any longer because you want to whitewash a central chapter of the country's founding that is based on slavery. So you take all those three together, you end up with this question, and I'll just pose it this way. One of the mothers who worked with me on the Mayor's Task Force on Police Reform said, well, on the gun thing, I used to only worry about my three black sons encountering with white policemen. Now I have to worry about them encountering in a store or somewhere every white person who's carrying a gun that they may look at the wrong way or say something the wrong way. Now I have to fear for them on a constant 24/7 basis, wherever they are, whatever they're doing. And that's just not right. That's not right. The voter suppression thing is not right. And this trying to change history through this bill is just not right.
I was having a discussion earlier today about the importance or the lack thereof of civil rights organization in today's society, because there's so much of what we believe in under attack that you would think that there's no counterattack taking place, that there's been no response, there's no pushback on some of these things that are happening. And the honest truth is that there's so much coming at us that it's almost more difficult than the average person would seem to understand about what it takes to really respond. You know, you can't just take, I have a staff of 23 people, a board of another 25, and I've got, maybe 300 volunteers. That's not enough against a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week attack against many of the things that we believe in. I've got one Urban League in Houston, I've got one NAACP, and a host of other organizations that are all doing little bits and pieces. But as I remind people, when the National Urban League goes to Austin every 2 years, we make maybe a 1 to 2 day trip. That's all our resources really allow for. When we go to the national office in DC, we go to the Capitol in DC. That's a 1 day trip of some 90 affiliates throughout the country. And we've got a whole host of bills and issues that we're concerned about. We walk the halls for 1 day, and then we coalesce for another day or two. But then we're back homes in our states doing the programmatic response of how do we ensure that, for someone who doesn't have a job, we're training them to get one, or doesn't have a home, we're helping to acquire their first time home buying experience. So you're kind of torn between doing the work to kind of save you've heard the story, Larry, about the starfish along the sand shore.
Oh yeah.
And so you make the choice between, do I go and tell, the powers that be and try to change the currents of the ocean, or do I try instead to throw in one starfish at a time because it makes a difference to that starfish that we save, right? And so we do a little bit of both, but nearly not enough of either. So you're challenged in these spaces of where people put their attention, time, and money. And we have to question, are those in fact the right places, or the most important places to put them, if in fact these policies are slowly destroying our country, our community.
When you talked about the starfish, this brings to mind, of course, the discussion about education next. And Dr. Kleinberg just released his survey on the Houston area annual survey yesterday. And he reminded us once again that the under 20 young people in our city is our future workers, our future voters, our future everything. And that makeup of those under 20 is 51% Latino, 18% Black, and 9% Asian. In other words, 70% of all young people in Houston are African American or Latino. And you and I have had this discussion offline before about education being so critical and central to these young people having a chance, not only the educational services, but the support system that they need to be able to succeed. And we seem to keep giving lip service to that point that we understand that fact, but yet we're not doing anything to ensure that those young people have the future that they need, not just to, as we and I, have talked about, not just to survive, not even to thrive, but to flourish. I mean, human beings were meant to flourish to the fullest of their God-given potential. And we don't have that here in Houston now in our education system. And I know, Judd, that you've been spending a lot of time on education with the young people you work with through the Urban League. Where do you see this headed? I mean, what's the next steps in this process?
Well, I think it's important that we attempt to fight the battle perhaps in a different way. We've seen that over the years, the strategies of old have not worked. The strategies of the 60s seem to get people's attention. So I think that you will see more people in that age group responding. I think you'll see a coalition between the local kind of organizations, the NAACPs, Urban Leagues, et cetera, working together, and then maybe linking arms with the more non-traditional leaders of our community, the Bundys, the Trader Truths, the local celebrities in your population, the home of Beyonce. Maybe we can pull in some of those folks that seem to get the likes, seem to get the people's attention, seem to have that ability to captivate the emotions of other people. I think we as traditional organizational leaders have to be willing to allow these new leaders to join our efforts with some of the tried and true things that we're doing and have done, and join them with some of the new things that they're doing, because we have to get the public's attention. And we have to do it in a way that blends some of the old with some of the new, and we're able to then redirect where dollars and our focus and attention goes. So I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that finally, due to the deaths of George Floyd and then the countless others before him and those subsequent to him, that people are paying attention, that they're wanting a different way to look at. You and I served on the police reform review task force, so that when we look at that police budget, we're not talking about taking away that budget. Maybe you're talking about expanding it, but giving it all the resources and tools that it truly needs. Maybe you don't need, 2,000 people in law enforcement. Maybe you need 1,750 and another 250
right.
on the outside, right? Or in some other aspect of where we see the needs being, but they can still fall under the department's direction.
Right.
So, trying not to get caught up in the wordsmithing that we do to each other and how we play with these labels and these slogans that separate us, but to get beyond all that and really have real talk discussions about what are we trying to accomplish. But I'm glad to see younger people getting engaged and getting involved and challenging, people like myself who are charged with these jobs, and we're just got to be more creative about how we get things done.
Mm-hmm. You served with distinction, as you mentioned, on the Mayor's Task Force on Policing Reform. And we have just, as you know, released the last couple, the Mayor's 50% basically of the recommendations that he's implementing. And more importantly, and you know this very clear as a former city council member, not only is he endorsing them and making them happen and implementing them, he's putting money behind them because that's been the whole issue. In this case, an investment so far of $35 million that is committed to different programs over a 3-year period. So the question I have for you is that the Forward Times, I couldn't find it right quick. The front page thing is that police reform comes to Houston in big, huge, bold letters. I've not seen them use those big, bold letters on anything on their front page in a long time. So things are changing. Things are happening. The Houston Police Department is trying to be more transparent. We are holding them more accountable. And a lot of it has to do with our new police chief, Troy Finner, who is really doing an excellent job because his heart is in this. He's committed to it. All the recommendations he wholeheartedly endorsed. And he came up through the ranks. He was a patrolman, now he's a chief. Right. So everybody knows him and he knows his department. My question for you is, where do you see this next phase as we get to the first anniversary of George Floyd and living what I refer to as living in the George Floyd reality? What's the next phase? What comes in the next quarter and the next quarter after that? I know you and the Urban League have given a lot of thought on the national level where this dialogue needs to go. What's the next important things to be talking about?
Well, the dialogue is the word. The Urban League is launching its Center for Social Justice and Education here shortly, and all of this kind of came about as a result of the George Floyd incident. It came about when we saw that corporate leaders were interested in talking, learning more. It came about when, again, young leaders were stepping up and taking it upon themselves to be heard and to demonstrate peacefully. So obviously people are at a time where they want discussion, and the discussion of the progress on those 100 plus recommendations is going to be part of what we're having discussions about. I've called you a couple of times because you led a fantastic effort to ensure that we had the opportunity to have this discussion and to implement or to put forth more than 100 recommendations for the chief and the mayor to take a look at. And I'll probably come to you again, Larry. I mean, I've already called the chief a couple of times. I've told the mayor. When you asked us to serve on these task force, understand that we were not serving for the sake of just serving. We were serving with the intent that there would be change. So we're going to put ourselves, like other organizations, the YMCA, the Prairie View A&M, others, TSU, we're going to put ourselves in a position to ensure that there's ongoing dialogue. And I think that finally, people are talking to one another. We've got to make sure that people not only talk, but they're listening. I think you once told me many years ago, learn to speak, but also learn to listen.
Yeah.
You've been a great leader in that space.
That's the key.
So making sure that we're doing both, and maybe even having some training about what that really means.
Yep. That's an important point. We do need the training around what that really means. How does it look like, walk like, talk like, and put some really specificity into making that happen. I found the headline. There it is right there.
Wow. That is big.
Big bold print. To your point, though, Judson, I think the thing that you and I know from our era, from your father's era, and even your grandfather's era particularly, is that what's missing is this idea of relationships. And not just any kind of relationships built on mutual trust and respect. We don't have those across the board. We don't have those deep kind of working relationships that have turned into friendships like yours and I have over these many, many years. That whole thing is that nothing happens without trust. Nothing happens without trust. Well, why do people not trust each other? Because they don't know each other. Because they haven't taken the time to know each other, to develop relationships with each other. So part of the thing you mentioned about training and getting people together, the diverse group of people together, is just so they can get to know each other as a starting point, to listen to each other's story, to understand that all our stories are just stories along the journey, not better than, more than, or less than, just our stories. And that's our life. And I think if we can set up opportunities to do that through the Urban League and to other groups, let's call people together and see how we can get people to know each other across sectors in Houston. I always reminded what Steve Kleinberg said. Houston is, yes, the fourth largest city, yada, 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 most diverse city in America, yada, yada, all that good stuff. We're also the most racially segregated city in America. We're also the most gated community segregated city in America. And this time it's along the lines of social economic lines and then racial lines. In the 60s, it was racial and then social economic. So now we have a chance, though, to bring people together, because if we don't do that, Houston does not have a future. Our future is that diversity, but the diversity has to work in a positive way. So let's work on how we can set up some opportunities and some forums, both through the Urban League and through the University of St. Thomas. Would love to do that. That's just part of who they are. And we are starting that off with something coming up soon to begin that dialogue.
Good.
So let's, and I got about a minute left, so let me give it to you to wrap up. Anything you haven't touched on that you want to say, please do so.
Well, just your last comments that, I think we've all been working kind of in our own silos for many years. And even our funders are saying, you're doing some of the same things that this other group is doing. And this other group, 1 to 3 of you guys kind of come together. And I think they recommended that first, and then they began to decrease the amount of funding that we each got. So that we really kind of got
a little nudge, huh? Yeah, okay.
So we really kind of got the message. So, I think that sometimes it takes a while for people to understand the power and synergy and working together. So we've taken that to heart. We're working with all of our partners. Matter of fact, I've got a meeting with the AJC here momentarily. We're going to be talking with the Asian community about the hate that's taking place across the country. And it used to be, that was your problem. These are my problems.
Right.
Handle yours, I handle mine. And I think that what we saw with the division of the last administration that really kind of embraced isolationism and team picking, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
That didn't work for us. That really set us back a number of years. It may have allowed us to express some of our inner inhibitions and speak our mind about some things that are really troubling us. But that's not the civil society that we worked so hard to have for so many years. You know, respect for each other, appreciation, diversity, all those things were good omens. We were working in that space, moving in that direction. My dear wife, Cora, who you know, she worked in diversity for years.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was her space.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, those jobs started going away more than 20 years ago. And look where we are some 20 years later. If you don't focus on it, you won't get it. And we took our eye off the ball.
Justin, I want to thank you for being on for such a time as this. I really appreciate spending this time with you. So I'll only end this way. To my friend, to my ally, to my trusted worker in the vineyard, that we've been together for many, many years, and we will continue to do so because that's what we're called to do as servant leaders. And Justin and I both believe deeply in servant leadership. I think it is part of our Catholic upbringing. It is from our parents and grandparents that we get it. It is from our parish life and the life that we experience through our congregations and our various parishes. And it is that kind of thing that we need to focus on more and more going forward. This is good work. This is good trouble. This is something that we all need to do and be involved in. And we need to understand that it's a calling. It's a calling to be involved in this work. And God gives us that chance to be called every single day. If we just listen, put ourselves in a posture to hear and listen to his calling and to respond in a positive way to take action. And I always say that hope is not a word that just sits there. Hope is not something that we do in our brain from a cognitive perspective. Hope is not an effective thing in our heart that we hope for certain things. Hope is action. Hope is constant, consistent action and behaviors. To have hope means that you're getting off your duff and you're doing something to make that hope happen, not just waiting for it to happen. So here we go. Again, Judson, I always end up with the little political thing. It's really quite simple. Show up, stand up, speak up, and follow up. That's really the success to getting anything done and accomplished that you want to do. So until next time, for as we come together for this session of such a time as this, as always, stay well, be safe, and peace, power, and love.